Welcome to the realm of magic and mystery, classic horror and sci-fi. You are now entering the House of the Unusual podcast with your hosts, Eddie and Joe. Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Joe Pavlansky, pop culture historian, writer for Scary Monsters magazine, and curator of the Crypt of Classics. Co-hosting, as always, is the maestro of mail-order mysteries and owner of houseoftheunusual.com, the one, the only, Eddie Guevara. Special guest tonight is Dave Harvasat. He was with SS Adams and did a bunch of cool stuff with magic. And Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you and let's give the audience a full introduction of yourself and a little bit of your. We all know everything there is to know about you and more.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it, Joe. Well, my background goes back to, like a lot of kids that read the back of comic books and dreamed about the items that they ordered and waited 4 to 6 to 8 weeks to get their treasures. But no, I started off, probably around 5 or 6 years old, begging my parents for some extra money and doing some household chores to get allowance. To buy things like Mystic Smoke and X-ray specs and sea monkeys and so forth. And I always had kind of this keen interest in magic, which I followed. And while I was in high school, I performed local shows for kids' birthday parties and different events, and always dreamed of owning a magic shop. And while in college, I was able to do that and had a shop in Seymour, Connecticut, which is about an hour and a half north of Manhattan. Ran that shop while going to school. And during that time, I met some important people that changed my life for my magic career, and became very, very interested in manufacturing, making things, novelties, and tricks. And one of the gentlemen, his name was Reverend Bill Rauscher. He had written a number of books on magic. And one day at a convention, I had a large table of novelties, mainly SS Adams products. And he asked me where I acquired those. And I told him that I found a lot of it in a garage from a magician, really a pitchman that demonstrated magic at Macy's in New York City. And he said that his first trick was an SS Adams snapper. It's a little device that, looks like you can do it, where you can catch this metal peg or plastic or wooden peg at the time, but no one else could do it. No one else could get the elastic band. And it was kind of just a cheap, inexpensive novelty, but that started him and his interest in magic, and then writing books. So with that, we decided to do an article on the SS Adams Company in Neptune, New Jersey. And that turned into a visit there to the factory, an old 1800s large 50,000 square foot facility that made everything from joy buzzers to bug in the ice cubes to snake nut cans and so forth. And when I was there, I said to myself, this is my childhood. This is what I grew up with. This was the stuff underneath the Christmas tree and in my stockings. I'd love to be a part of it and to own it. And the book was published. It was called SS Adams, High Priest of Pranks and Merchants of Magic. And it was one of the first books I published under my company called 1878 Press. And it was a big hit, but that was the first introduction to the factory. And coupled with all the merchandise I had of the company, the old retro stuff, as I said earlier, I wanted to be part of it. So I negotiated with the great grandson of Sam Adams, who started the company in 1906, to buy 50% of it. And then I became the president of the company running it. up until around 2009 when we licensed the company to another facility that still makes the tricks, not in this country but overseas. But the name is still going. So from 1906 to 2020, the products are still falling under that brand. So that was kind of my introduction with Adams, and I've been involved in many other projects with books and Houdini merchandise and licensing. I have the license to the Adams Family, Uncle Fester mystery light bulb, which we all know, the iconic 1960s series, where Uncle Fester would light a bulb in his mouth, which was no more than a magic trick, and was originally put out by Pointer Products of Ohio. And I found that there was a need to have that item put out again, and decided to do that. And I have a license on Houdini cologne, a fragrance. So it doesn't smell.
Guaranteed to make the women disappear.
Yeah, women disappear, and it doesn't smell like old rusty handcuffs or anything like that. But through all this, I had met Eddie, kind of early on, and we would meet up at, I guess it was the Bergen Mall. They kind of had Eddie had a spot under the mall there that was like I can't really describe it. Eddie could describe it better, but it was kind of like, the forgotten part of the mall where they rented out the old storefronts to people for rental. And he had, of course, it was jammed with merchandise and his collection. And we collaborated on a number of things, different ideas and so forth. So let's see, what else can I tell you? Well, in 2006, SS Adams, we had our 100th anniversary. And we had a big event held at the Berkeley Carteret in Asbury Park, because SS Adams was originally an Asbury Park location. And back in 2006, Asbury Park was really in a sad state of affairs. It's not like it is now, where it's been revived and the real estate property is pretty lucrative. Back then, you could drive down and see the area where Bruce Springsteen had started and so forth, and walk on the boardwalk, which I did a number of times. Was very depressing. The Howard Johnson's there was closed, and all the arcades were gone. And the Berkeley Carteret was the last hotel that was operating practically. And I remember we invited people from all over, our old vendors, Fun Incorporated, who was a competitor of ours from Chicago, and companies like D. Robbins and Brooklyn, New York, and just a lot of the old Philip Morris, out of North Carolina. We invited all the people who had been customers and had patronized us for years. And I was quite embarrassed to have them come down and see burning cars and things in Asbury at the time. But we had the event at the Berkeley, and it was, we gave all the money to charities, animal shelters, and so forth. And we had a big crowd, and it was good to see. And we everyone come out, and we had a very good silent auction where we auctioned off original sets of Life of the Party, joke sets with all the classic effects, the joy buzzers, the snake in the cans, the fake cockroaches. And we had a couple original vials of the Kachoo sneezing powder, which started the company way back in 1906. So, it was good times and good memories. But it's all, a part of our nostalgic history and growing up. And anything else I can add, I would be happy to.
Well, it's interesting. I told you, Joe, that you'd be very impressed with Dave. It was kind of interesting when I started my magic rendezvous. When I was into the early stages of mail order in 1986, 87, I went to the International Toy Trade Show. At that time, I had met a younger Chris, who is the S.S. Adams great grandson, and I met him there. And in 1989, when I opened my magic shop in West New York, New Jersey, I actually went down there, drove to Neptune, where the S.S. Adams company was, and I got a tour of the place. I was able to see where they did all the, all the different magic tricks, how they did the joy buzzer, and it was a very interesting tour. So fast forward to the year 1998, from 89, give or take, 97, 98. I'm not going to say precisely when it was because I know it was around that time. My brother, I had spent about 2 or 3 years where I didn't really do any mail order or magic stuff. So my brother says to me, I'm going to help, with your site, this and that. And I'm like, okay, I'll think about it. But the next week I received 10,000 business cards he had produced for me. And he had started the main website for me of House of the Unusual. Having done that, it kind of forced me to go back into business. So this is kind of funny because we're talking of a very young Dave in his early 20s probably. And he's there now, owner, president of S.S. Adams. And I call up S.S. Adams because the first thing I figured is let me call S.S. Adams and let me get my products from them. Because I remember at the time I had about $2,000 or $3,000 credit with them. And I decided to go there. And, I said, let me give them a call. So when I called, David picked up the phone. So I'm like, can I speak with Chris Adams? And Chris Adams says, and Dave says, well, I can help you and stuff. And I'm like, no, I want to speak with Chris Adams. And he was kind of insistent, which I thought it was kind of funny, though, because I'm like, are you kidding me? I want to speak with Chris Adams. And this guy still wants to talk to me, So I don't know what I said that finally he puts on Chris Adams. And Chris turns around and says to me, well, actually, David is the one that can help you, Eddie, because he's in charge of the company. And I said to myself, oh, my God. Okay, fine. David comes on the phone. And it was so funny, though, because I really liked the guy. We started talking and talking. And then we made it we would get on the phone for 7 days a week for the next 6, 7 months as we talked for hours on days. We would talk to sometimes 1, 2 o'clock in the morning from like 10 p.m. And I felt like this guy's awesome. So from there, that's what started our friendship. And later on, we finally, going through a lot of different times where we collaborated in things or talked about products, this and that. We recently actually got together about a year ago. And because what I used to do at the time is when I sold my mail order items, especially on the through the mail, instead of me carrying the products, I would, because 90% of my products on my website were based out of the S.S. Adams catalog. So what I would do is I would tell Dave, hey, Dave, I need a dozen snake cans, whatever it would be. And Dave would meet me and we would meet in the Bergen Mall. And that's where he first seen the Bergen Mall and all that stuff. Now, the interesting part with this was the fact that it lasted a while. I was able to sell without spending much money in stock and stocking merchandise and needing a big space. So what happened is that I think about a year ago, like I said, we decided that there's a lot of products I was not able to make, but I still wanted to continue selling all the original stuff from the 1970s. So we got together, Dave and myself, and we actually created 4 of those original products, and we started an LLC, which at the time was all ready to set and go. And then, of course, the COVID threw us back a couple of months because everything was closed, and this was around December. But we created 4 fabulous products together. And in the collaboration between me and him, because, Dave and me, we go now back almost 30 plus years. So we did the original Frankenstein, and I gave Dave my original Frankenstein, or I scanned it and gave him the images. And he then turned around and had one of his people that I guess that they do, the graphic artists that do most of the books he publishes, because right now as Dave had mentioned, I think he's publishing close to, if I'm correct, Dave, about 30 titles now you've published, including Life of the Party, the famous S.S. Adams book.
Yeah, that's right. Approximately that many. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened basically with that is we created the 7-Foot Frankenstein, the one from the comic book, which is the more popular one and known by more people that are about my age, because it was the most well known in comic books. It ran the longest, and actually, believe it or not, I believe one of them sold much more than the famous Color Frankenstein that was from the late early 60s. We also duplicated the Hypnocoin. I was able to get my original. We took photographs, not photographs. I sent it out with in collaboration with Dave. We sent it out to a company there, and we were able to reproduce that with the original flyer. Then Dave and me had mentioned, and Dave brought up this idea because he remembers growing up, which I did in my time. Everybody had one of those weather homes, little weather houses. And the weather houses that when it rained, you would have a little guy with an umbrella come out, and when it was sunny, a female would come out. And having said that, we decided, and Dave came up with the brainstorming idea of why don't we make it into a haunted house, like a haunted house weather vane thing. And we produced those. In fact, we only have a limited run of them. And it's something that I think a lot of the listeners of this radio would probably like to come across and get it, because after this Halloween, it's not going to be made available anymore. So we're very limited in the amount we have. That's something that needs to be picked up right away. And together with that, Dave being a magician and having an entire life collection of magic, and I believe as which you didn't mention, Dave, that you have one of the largest Houdini collections probably in the world. And another thing that I don't know if you forgot, not you forgot, but you didn't mention is in the History Channel, they had a special, if I believe it was the History Channel or the Science Channel.
Yeah, it was the Science Channel.
The Science Channel, The Secrets of Houdini. And in the very first episode where Houdini, they do the torture chamber, is it called the Houdini water torture cell? Dave has the original Houdini paperwork that Houdini himself sketched out of how the torture cell would be done. And since he has the original, they asked him to appear on the show. But at the time, being in California, I think you appeared, Dave, in a Zoom call. But,
Yeah, through Skype. Yep.
So anybody that wants to see Dave, and that can go to the Science Channel and, look up that and look at the very first episode. And 3/4 of the episode in, Dave is on it. So David came up with another idea of taking a very famous magic trick that was done in the 1950s, and we redid it into what's called the Alien Space Orb. Both of those items, including actually all the 4 items, are being sold because Dave has most of them up in Connecticut, and we haven't been able to register the company due to the fact of the COVID and all that stuff. Dave has been taking the orders for our products, and that is through either Presco on eBay or in Amazon. If you actually, you search, what is the name you use in Xanadu? Is your Amazon?
Yeah, Xanadu or Xanadu Magic. Yep.
Right, and if you actually look for the Uncle Fester light bulb, and you see that'll be David's company, because 1878 Press is the book publishing company you have. And let me tell you, anybody that can actually go online and look at that will find that 1878 Press has phenomenal books. I have several copies of all the books he publishes, and I got to tell you one thing: they're better than the ones you would get in Barnes and Noble, like really high class publishing. So anyway, that's basically the story with me and Dave. We collaborated in a lot of things because his nature of the business and being in magic for so long has also been in what I've been the collector. I've been the guy that maintained the items since I was a kid. I'm a lot older than both of you guys, but at the same time, it actually it's fabulous that right after me, there's still a young generation that can carry the dream of people out there. Dreams like waiting in the mailbox. I actually had two very interesting emails I had looked at that some, that people have wrote me. Now I don't have it in front of me right now that I could say. I'll read it to you. I should have actually made, but it was interesting because one of the guys is like telling me, I'm so excited that I'm definitely not going to leave your site. It's very interesting the stories I hear from people, and the most funniest thing is that people remember the most was not what the product was not what the product was described, because obviously when they got it they were more disillusioned than ever say that they received something that they were happy they got. It was the fact of the waiting time, the anticipation. That's what made it so exciting for people, that still people my age today seek after, to remember that useful part of us when we dream bigger than life. When monsters in comic books and stuff came out off the pages, and we were able to like dream about it. It was a different total time. No video games, very few things. In fact, it was when Atari was beginning to enter the field, and it was so exciting to still order things from the X-ray glasses to, and the best part about that is that knowing David, and and made it really interesting, is the fact that he took me on a tour one day of the SS Adams Company, a second tour that I went there, and we took some photographs and stuff. But it's been a fantastic journey that I can't ever say that between both me, David, and everybody that has come across us, we can't say that we regret it at any moment. So go ahead, Joe, give your input on it, or I'll give it to you, Dave.
I was actually just thinking today, when you had mentioned the wait time, and a lot of the people that, place the orders or that we talk with about, the mail order mysteries, there's a few things that always come up in the conversations. One is how, excited they were to get their item, and then how disappointed they were when it came in the mail, because it was usually nothing that was, that they thought it would be from the comic ads. And the second part is, like you said, is the anticipation. There was that, 4 to 8, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, for the delivery, and that anticipation of it, arriving. You'd come home every day from school and check your mailbox for, the next 2 months or so, waiting to see if your item arrived. And I was actually thinking about that this morning, because I had placed an order through Amazon, and I had, the 1-day shipping. And after I placed my order, and I went online to do some stuff, and I was checking over the House of the Unusual website, and then it hit me. I said, how, what would I do if I clicked on Amazon and it said, okay, your item got, 4 to 8 weeks of delivery, just kind of unheard of, in today's world where everything is at our fingertips so quickly. So, it's nice, when you place an order, like I did through Eddie at the House of the Unusual. It took there was that anticipation that he gave me. I was waiting. I found myself. I said, okay, I'll place the order. I know it's going to take a few days to get to my house after all the processing. But I actually, after about a week, I found myself, because I work night turn, so I sleep during the day, and then my mail comes about noon. So I usually wake up about 1 o'clock or so, and I found myself getting up and going outside to check my mail to see if my package had come. And it kind of brought me back to that simpler time, back when I was young, 6, 7, 8 years old, of ordering stuff through these comic ads and everything, all that. So it not only do you get some cool products from the site, but you also get that experience of what it had been like, back in the heyday of these mail order items. And for the people that have experienced it before but haven't done so in years, it's a nice little nostalgic trip for them. So that's something very, very cool that happens when you order through the House of the Unusual.
It's funny that you're saying that. You know how I've been looking for the robot plans for probably the last 40 years. You can tell how hard they are to find when David himself, who Dave, I believe you one of your things is because you do own an auction house as well called Harborside and Ewing that sells. It's kind of like Christie's or Sotheby's. You guys sell posters that are worth thousands of dollars, and the auction takes place 1 or 3 times a year, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, sometimes we have auctions up to about 6 times a year. Got another one coming up before Halloween. We always try to do one in October because Houdini died in the month of October on Halloween on October 31st. So we try to have a kind of a Halloween October auction with a lot of magic, but a lot of things that Houdini specifically. So yeah, we'll be having one of those. But
Well,
with your robot plans, I mean, you've been, if you're going out every day, you've been doing that for 40 years, thinking it's coming in the mail. But I was thinking about when Joe was talking about ordering on Amazon, and if you have Amazon Prime or one of the speedy services, how we've kind of as consumers, we've become spoiled because we order something and we expect it to be there, within like 24 hours or in 48 hours. But I was recently, I get all these solicitations, like I'm sure you guys do too sometimes, from Publishers Clearinghouse, saying about winning $1,000 a day for the rest of your life. And it's enticing to, do an entry. And I was doing that the other evening with my 10-year-old son. And of course, Publishers Clearinghouse, they originally were started in, I think, the 50s with selling magazine subscriptions. And that's what they were known for. But now that, most people don't even buy magazines anymore, subscribe to them, they've gone really to selling merchandise. So instead of, getting the thing in the mail, you used to get like the big packet from them in the mail, and you had to send it in and put, these seals on and stamps and mail it back. Now they get you on the internet right into your inbox. And before you could do an entry, they make you go through about 20 pages of merchandise. You got to scroll through, and it will say, hey, no purchase is necessary, does not increase your chances of winning, and so forth. But if you buy any of that stuff on there, whether it's usually household goods or things that, are supposed to make your life easier, it will say, please allow 4 to 6 weeks for delivery. So I was looking at the other night, and it just kind of made me think back. It's like one company that, they're still standing by that time frame. They're not telling you, if you buy this, whatever, this gadget, that's going to open cans really fast, or, a nightlight, the perpetual nightlight, or whatever it may be. You're not getting it tomorrow. You're going to be getting it in, basically a month or a month and a half. So I just thought about when Joe was talking about that there's still that that disclaimer that you got to wait a while to get your product.
Well,
Dave, I have to be honest. I didn't even know Publishers Clearinghouse was still around because I haven't seen any emails or got any of the any
Right.
physical mail from
let,
them in I don't know how many
let me
years.
let me
Yeah.
let me tell
Yeah,
you
they're
guys.
still active, and they're very, I mean, they're very they're very aggressive, and they have a very good email platform, and you play games and you win tokens and you could get prizes. They're really trying to engage the person whose attention span, on the internet these days, it's like click from one thing to the other. They're giving you all the bells and whistles, even though the odds are incredibly, incredibly rare that you're going to win. They're throwing all this free, not only ordering stuff where they get your mailing address and they've got your email, but they get all your information. But they're also offering you free stuff. If you buy from them, you're going to get this and that.
Well,
Yeah.
If anybody from Publishers Clearinghouse is listening to this, please don't send me.
No, well, let me tell you guys
enough.
something. I want to tell
Well,
you
maybe
guys
they
something
could
right
be
now.
a sponsor of the podcast, but no,
Yeah.
There you go, Eddie.
No,
yeah.
I'm going to tell you guys something because you guys are talking about that, and you brought up two topics that I was unaware of, and I'm going to tell you something. First of all, when you're looking back at cereal boxes today, they still go for that 46-week delivery if there's something that you're going to get, like a license plate for kids with their name imprinted. It takes about 6 weeks to receive it. So they still adhere to that original Publishers Clearinghouse thing. But David, what really blew my mind is I was looking at a catalog about 3 nights ago, and the catalog I was looking was a 1993 Harriet Carter. And if you remember that story, how Allied Plastics took my 7-foot ghost idea and started making, well, I seen the ghost and the witch they were selling there. And I saw the ad, and when I'm looking at the ad, something said to me, let me check out if these people are still in business. To my shock, Harriet Carter still produces catalogs. They're still in business, and they have a big standing in the internet, which I was kind of really shocked that a company that old is still there and thriving. I just wanted to bring that up.
Well, yeah, because Harriet Carter's capitalizing on an older population, and people still do like to get catalogs in the mail. It's just they like to hold something, just like a book. When the Kindles came out, and there was just the publishers were very frightened that no one was going to be buying hardcover, softcover books anymore, that it was all going to be read online. That may have hurt sales somewhat, but people still like to hold something and having something that's tangible, in their hands. So I could see where Harriet Carter, there may be a few others that target, 65 and older.
Well, I'm younger than that, just to let you know, Dave. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
It's funny that you mentioned that, Dave, because there's still a few generations around that enjoy physical copies. I'm 40, and I still, I grew up with, the pre-internet time, and I still enjoy having a physical copy in my hand. I'm not a fan of reading anything, digital. So there's, and there's still people, in their 80s and 90s the same way. But, you also have, these newer generations that really grew up with only digital. So I'm wondering if, maybe in 50, 60 years or so, if actual physical copies are going to go almost by the wayside, because these newer generations are so used to having everything digital. And there's still, a few, younger people that enjoy, physical copies, that they haven't totally bought into the whole digital thing. But, it makes me wonder, what it's going to look like, in 50 or so years. Are there going to be actual bookstores? Can you get physical copies of everything? Because we start seeing now, a lot of our comic books, DC Comics in particular, are switching to a lot of digital, minus their main title. So it kind of seems like it's leaning towards that way.
It's very difficult for printing, like especially for giving away things that are free, because of the cost, not necessarily because of the cost of the printing, because printing has, come a long way, and it's where color printing 25 years ago was expensive. Now it's almost practically the same price, but the big problem is the cost of the mailing. And, with our auction company, we do mainly online auctions, where everything is viewed on an online catalog. But occasionally we'll do, like once or twice a year, we'll do a hardcover printed catalog, not hardcover, but a bound catalog, full color. And it's costly, but the real expense is mailing it out. I mean, right now, if you put something in a priority mail envelope, it's costing almost $9. Even flat rate, it's like $8.80 or something like that. It changes all the time. That's astronomical, to give away something. And even if you send media mail, which is possible. You may be paying $3, but it's going to take, a long, long time to get there, especially with what's going on now. So I think things are just going to eventually, because of the cost of the mailing, the shipping, it's going to be all online. And if someone wants to order a book, well, they're paying for the shipping, but to get free stuff in the mail, that's kind of that's going to disappear, I believe.
You know what the
Yeah.
you know what the problem is, though. I want to tell you guys about this, that they did a survey. I think it was, I don't know, last year or the year before, and people still prefer print copy because of the fact that you don't see it on your iPad or your Kindle reader, but it like there's glitches. So when you read online for a very long period of time, it's gonna hurt your eyes. So unless technology continues, which it is growing, we're still gonna have the print copy for a while, because before this COVID thing, Barnes and Noble was actually they came out, I think, for the last 2 or 3 years. They were on the blue, not the red. They were making money each year in their sales and stuff. So to answer your question, I think in our lifetime we're still going to see the print to continue to be a dominant force in the industry.
Well, I hope so. I mean, like I said, future's kind of looking more towards digital. And I even see now a lot of, people are doing a print to order type deal where you have to order it and then they'll print it, just because there's not many bookstores out anymore, and there is that digital version of stuff. Like even with magazines, a lot of magazines have gone by the wayside and have gone strictly to digital. My wife worked at Barnes and Nobles a few years back, and I remember I would go there several times a week and check out the magazines and books, and I noticed over the years just how lesser and lesser the areas were becoming, because there was just a lot of the titles were going to digital, or they were just flat out going defunct, because like Dave said, the shipping was a major deal, and also the printing the printing costs have skyrocketed. So there's just a lot of, I think, issues out there. I hope that actual print never goes away, for people like us that actually, like to have the things in our hands. But, it's not only books or magazines that are going that way. Video games are going the same way, where they're going more towards downloads, and even movies and music. You could go into, a Best Buy or some other electronic store, and, there's, you'll be lucky to find a music section, if there is anything. And even the DVD section is smaller than it was, 10 or 15 years ago, because, you have all these streaming services, and it's easier to purchase something online and add it to your digital file.
It is, but remember one thing. You're still going to have that generation that doesn't, anybody who's over 50, believe it or not, doesn't know how to even turn a computer on. And I can tell you this much, you're going to still have, as long as we have such a growing population of older folks, which we continue to have, where they're living into 100 years old, you're still going to have that old media. You're still going to have DVDs. You're still going to have, Blu-rays, because people want a tangible copy of things.
That stuff will always be around. I just think it'll play it'll keep playing a much smaller role in
but look what
society.
Look what Dave just said. That him and his son, he was reminiscing with the Publishers Clearinghouse because he wanted to see what it was like again. That's the same thing I got told by Kirk Damaris, that him and his son go. You know how many stories I get and emails from people that they want to do the same thing with their children. So the point I'm trying to say is, yes, media eventually has gone a long way. Digital, like Dave, you do everything online. You mail out a few catalogs, but still, you have what makes it fun in what you do. The search for the treasure. You go out throughout the entire country trying to buy magical supplies.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the search. I mean, years ago, when you wanted something, you did it if you were a collector, you did it the old-fashioned way. You either put an ad out that you're looking for something, or like in Connecticut, there used to be I think it's still in business, but it's a lot thinner than it used to be, but it was almost the size of like a telephone book. It was called the Bargain News, and it came out, I think every other week or so. And you had classifieds if you were looking for autos, or you're looking for antiques, or if you were looking for, the robot plans, whatever it was, you put an ad out in there, and it was free to put the ad. And they got the sponsorship through the advertisers.
Well, Dave, here's the deal. Just think about when you say, which is funny, they say the robot plans. You've traveled the world, the whole country I'm talking about, buying magic supplies. I've asked you to be in the lookout for this for probably the last 20 years. In fact, the HypnoCoin disc we put out, in order for us to get, because I lost my original in the 1995 fire I had, to get a copy of one, I think Dave drove 8 hours. Am I correct at that?
I drove very far to get that. Yeah, I drove very far to get that and to look at some other stuff, but I knew they had it and I wanted it. And yeah, but that's the point I was making, is that when the internet came out, those classified things were gone. Now you could research things. You could, you've got Craigslist, and of course you have Facebook, and just a lot of avenues to get stuff. And eBay, with just, it's instantaneous. You could do a search. So it took the fun out of, in some ways, the anticipation, because you used to actually have to write to somebody and then wait for them to write back if they had it. If they didn't want to put their phone number, make it known, and this classified, and it was this back and forth, and then you got to the price and how much was it, and but now it's just okay, it's here, it's available. But what I do with research is something that's also, because of the internet, is gone, and that is people don't correspond, they don't write letters anymore, and most of the things that I have found and tracked down is because someone leaves a paper trail, where they wrote in the 1950s, they just bought this or that. And when that individual dies, and their papers, if they're not thrown away, goes to another group of collectors, now you have a name, you have an address, you have where it was sold, and you could track it down somewhat. And that's what I've been successful doing. But think just now with email, no one prints out emails and puts them in a file. It's gone forever once that individual passes away and their account is closed. So a lot of historical things that are located, or information is told in a letter about the provenance, like this person had it and this person had it. It's usually because it's been documented in writing, not on a computer, but in letters and documents. No one does that anymore. They do everything through email, and they do everything through electronic means. That's going to be gone. And when a new format comes in, maybe, when we're a little bit older, I'm 2 years older than Joe. It's going to change.
Your information, I didn't mean to, but I got to tell you something, my friend. I do print out some of my emails. Just to bring that up to you.
Just to interject real quick, we're talking about the hunt. I posted a video up on House of the Unusual on YouTube a few weeks ago, dealing with I just received a comic zine number 1 from 1971, and I believe it's, if I remember, it's about 45 pages or so, something like that, or maybe a little bit less. But anyways, more than half of that magazine, and I touch in it in the video, more than half of that magazine are all classifieds. And if you look at the classifieds, like Dave was saying, if a lot of them don't have a phone number, so if you wanted something that they had, you had to write to them. You had to wait for them to write you back, with maybe a price, a condition, maybe if they included any photos. And then, you had to send them, the money and all that. You had to even see if it was, still available. So, that could take just
Well,
weeks just trying to go back and forth with, just through regular snail mail, just trying to see if an item's available and, any more information on it. So,
yeah, it's different.
now we have everything at our
It,
fingertips, but back then that was, these magazines or these fanzines, that was the eBay, that was the
that
Craigslist
was
of
just
the
like
70s and 80s.
Exactly.
Toy
Yeah.
Shop was. But I'm sorry, I was saying just like Toy Shop was. You remember Toy Shop magazine? Any of you guys do?
No,
I
I
never
don't.
had it. No, Eddie.
You never? Okay, Toy Shop was before eBay. Was that paper, a newspaper that you looked and every collector advertised in it? It was like 50, 100 pages, and it was as big as the Star. Remember the Star, National Enquirer? And I
Yep.
have several copies. I thought I had shown you that, Dave. But one thing I'm going to tell you right now that Dave probably might not. I don't know if you remember this or not, Dave. But one time I was looking at my products, and you were over in my place. I forgot where. We were going through my stuff, and you said, I don't know if you noticed, all the products you have are from the 1980s. And it dawned on me because here I was actually selling on eBay and all that. I was selling original X-ray glasses, original this and that, not even realizing that some of the glasses I had sold had said Honey Toy Industries in the back. They're sometimes listing for $500 each now. I had the very first copies of those things, and I had sold them. And I remember seeing them, and I'm like, what the heck? It's the same thing. You told me, that what you have is retro, and that's when I realized that my collection was all from 1980. And I said, I mean, what I'm saying, my collection, most of the products, because that's when I had my magic shop,
Man, is that
1989.
considered retro now? The 80s?
Well, yeah, it's actually it's kind of, but Dave was the one that notified me, like told me, hey, and I said, yeah, sheesh, you're right about this. Now, Dave, I want to ask you a good question because we're kind of like getting to the last 10 minutes of the show here. And I want to bring up, and I had mentioned to Joe about it, but I want you to tell. You recently published the book, and it was concerning Mr. Mitchell, the sixth astronaut that walked on the moon, sixth man on the moon.
Yes.
And it appeared in Coast to Coast, which is a show that's been around since Art Bell originally produced it back in the 40s and 50s. You want to elaborate a little bit on that subject?
Sure. Well, it goes back really to the gentleman I spoke to about earlier that started, his interest in magic with getting a couple of SS Adams products way back when, probably in the early 1940s. He was very good friends with Edgar Mitchell and visited Mitchell on a number of occasions. And when Edgar died in 2016, he had been working on a book about Mitchell and his life. And of course, knowing Bill Rauscher and publishing many of his books that he did, even though this was not magic, he's written other books that were interesting that are not magic, like a true story called The Psychic Mafia, and a book called The Death Camp Magicians, and other books, A Case Against Suicide. Many very interesting and informative books. So we did this book on Mitchell, and Coast to Coast had Edgar on a number of times because of his views on UFOs and even remote healing and so forth. And because he, was, he was an astronaut and someone who was well respected, and Dr. Mitchell and so forth, he gave credibility to those that, would believe that there was other life form out there in UFOs. And because Mitchell lived near Roswell, New Mexico, when he came back after the Apollo 14 mission, and he spent like over 9 hours on the moon and collecting moon rocks and just artifacts and so forth of the moon for NASA. He was a unique person, and his whole career after that was writing and lecturing and so forth. But because back at that time, if you were a moonwalker, you were, a hero. You risked your life because going to the moon was risky. You just didn't know traveling that far what was going to happen, and when you boarded, you just didn't know if you were going to come back. So people confided in him, and when he went, to back to the Roswell area, there were people that were still living at the time that had experienced things, in Roswell, and they thought that they could confide in him because of his experience and everything as a moonwalker and being with NASA. And I think it convinced him, and he had knowledge that something did occur and that there are unidentified flying objects, and it's not that of the government. So the book is very interesting. It just doesn't cover that aspect of his life and what he thinks about UFOs, but he wasn't shy about it. I mean, he was on a number of television programs, Larry King Live and so forth, and he would talk about it. Right. So the book is about that, and many other things in his life, and it's
and it's something they can get at 1878 Press.
1878 Press, and the author, 1878press.com, and Reverend Rauscher, who wrote the book, was on Coast to Coast several months ago, and it sold a lot of books. And the whole point of doing these books and so forth is, everyone says you do a book to make money, but a lot of times you do a book because it's informative. You want to get the information out there. You want to show your life's work and your interest. Of course, it's nice to make a profit on it, but that's not always the case when you put in all the research and the development and and everything like that, and the interviews. But and that's why I know, Eddie, like yourself, you're working on projects and so forth because you have a true desire and passion for it. You don't do it just saying, hey, I'm going to become wealthy. You do it because you have knowledge on the subject. Yeah, it's your passion.
Yeah. See, the only time I ever had an experience of going to the moon in my thing is a couple of weeks ago when I was moving my storage, and I picked up a display case, and the two pieces of glass rammed to my finger. I kind of visited the moon in a sense. But let me tell you.
Wait, gentlemen, we got to get ready to wrap things up here. Dave, give us your website, how people could get a hold of you, and any information on your auctions.
Okay, so there's two websites. One is was mentioned earlier, is called 1878press.com, and that's for the books and the publications, and it has contact information for me if you want to shoot me an email. And the other one is Haverset and Ewing Galleries, or it's www.hegalleries.com, and you'll see all the things that are available that are coming up for our magic auctions. We're primarily magic, sometimes spook show things, from the 50s and 60s and so forth, but mainly magic.
My last words are that if, as David had mentioned, his different sites, if there's anything you guys want to see, we do have in House of the Unusual, there's a link to Acme House Novelties, which is the company me and Dave have put together, where you can buy those products that I mentioned before. Other than that, I think, and I will say to you guys again, please listen to our podcast each week. And more important than anything, log on to our site, subscribe to our mailing list so that you can be kept up to date. And the more important thing is, become a member of the forum and the blog. Post your information. Let's be able to talk, communicate with each other, because this is fun and this is what we want to do. Having said that, Joe, any final words?
No, that's it, man. You guys hit everything on nail on the head. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. So good night, everyone.
Good night.